could have a super long intro right now, but I'm just going to skip to the common mistakes that I've seen hundreds of students make. This advice, of course, applies to the GRE, but also to the GMAT and any other tests you might take. Mistake number 1, rereading rather than random recalling. What is random recalling? Random recall occurs when you practice a subject without knowing what the next question will be about. This usually occurs through a randomized quiz or a practice test. Random recall forces your brain to retrieve information that it might not have accessed in a while. This is so much better than rereading, which, you might have guessed, just involves reading again the same cheat sheets and the same chapters they've already read. In a minute, I'm going to show you some research on this topic published by the New York Times. But first, I want to give you an analogy. It's the difference between brain sprinting and brain strolling. Let me explain. When you have a quiz that tests multiple topics at once, your brain doesn't know what's coming next, so it's forced to sprint from one topic to the next one and retrieving information along the way. This stretches the brain to its limit, not literally, helping it to grow. FYI, the brain is not actually a muscle. I kind of thought it was, but that's an urban myth. Brain strolling is when you pick one topic and do hundreds of examples that test the same skill. Like, for example, doing 50 absolute value questions in a row. It's fine, you probably will improve, just like you get some exercise from strolling down the beach. But your brain doesn't have to work hard because it simply spots a pattern and does the same thing again and again. It follows that pattern blindly. A few weeks later, when you've covered 10 more topics, and you come back to absolute values, your brain can't simply repeat the pattern because it hasn't done it in such a long time. You must have had that experience when you've practiced something 100 times and you think, I have mastered that. And then you come back a few weeks later and you can't remember. That's because you didn't employ random recall. You didn't force your brain to sprint and retrieve information. The information is in your brain somewhere, but you just aren't practiced at retrieving it. This brings me to re-emphasizing the importance of randomized quizzes and practice tests. For example, you can find randomized quizzes in the discrete questions section of the GRE official guide. I have a huge amount of anecdotal experience across over 1,000 students that this works, but now I'm going to show you some research to back it up. The article was called How Tests Make Us Smarter, and this was again from the New York Times. First, it describes how retrieving knowledge is super important. It says, the fact of improved retention after a quiz, called the testing effect or the retrieval practice effect, makes the learning stronger and embeds it more securely in memory. It also emphasizes the benefits of mixing up your retrieval practice. Here's an amazing example to back it up. A bunch of students were presented with material and quizzed on it 3 different times. And they got an average of A- on that material. And that compares with a C+ on the material that had been presented in the same way and reviewed 3 times, but not quizzed. The benefits of quizzing remained in a follow-up test 8 months later. This benefit is true of women and underrepresented minorities too. And this brings me to common revision mistake number 2, highlighting and underlining. Let me for a moment go back to that same article. It says that surprisingly, researchers have found that the most common study strategies like underlining, highlighting and rereading create illusions of mastery, but are largely wasted effort because they do not involve practice in accessing or applying what the students know. I know that's going to be mind-blowing for so many students. And I know this is students' sometimes favorite activity, to highlight or underline everything in a book. But I'm going to get deep for a second. If every single line in a book is highlighted, is any line highlighted at all? But anyway, yeah, the research doesn't back up underlining or highlighting. You're far better off spending the time on randomized quizzes and full-length practice tests. For the GRE, you can do at least 12 full-length practice tests from the likes of PowerPrep, Manhattan, and Kaplan without spending a large amount of money at all. You don't have to sign up to their full courses to get those practice tests. Some of them are even free. These are your goldmine, and don't forget to document your mistakes thoroughly. I've done another video on this topic that you can check out. I'm going to interrupt this broadcast to tell you to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. But do not highlight or underline your comment in any way. Mistake number 3, not spacing out your testing. I'm a big believer that your brain is an evolutionary weapon. It will gradually delete information that it doesn't deem to be useful to your survival. That's why you need to test yourself at regular intervals. This continually reminds your brain that those percentage skills, critical reasoning strategies, and advanced vocabulary are actually useful to you. Don't delete them. And here's the real crux of the video. All of this is why I don't recommend slowly making your way through a giant guidebook without any randomized quizzes or practice tests at regular intervals. If you're the type of student to do that, what will happen is you'll get to the end and you won't have practiced some of the stuff that you learned at the beginning for over 3 months. You'll forget most of it. Instead, you can work through the book, but do practice tests and randomized quizzes at regular intervals. I know what you're thinking. Philip, tell us, how regularly should we do practice tests? As a rough estimate, divide the time you have between now and your first real practice test by 10. Do 1 practice test at each of those 10 intervals. This leaves a couple more practice tests just in case you need to retake the test. Between the intervals, of course, you need to be going through the books, boosting your knowledge, boosting your vocabulary, watching GRE videos, and doing randomized quizzes. I'm not just drawing on my own experiences of over 10,000 hours of tutoring. I'm drawing on multiple sources of research. For example, my takeaway from reading this research is that we need to build up a regular rhythm of testing, spaced out according to when the real test is coming. A couple of weeks break is fine if your test is a year away and you're doing practice tests monthly. Or a 3 or 4 day break is fine if your test is 2 months away and you're doing practice tests weekly. Just don't slowly make your way through a super long book without testing your random recall skills at regular intervals. So those are the 3 common mistakes to avoid. Random recall, not rereading. Quiz yourself, don't underline or highlight. And space your practice tests at regular intervals according to when your real test is. As always, I hope this video was super helpful, and please do like and comment with a question about another topic you want me to cover. It really helps me get the content out there. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.